This is Dan Bolen, and I'm the host of the podcast, The Courage to Be Courageous, where people come from all over the United States and even some parts of the world to share their stories. They use courage to walk through their fear and be their authentic self. I'd like to encourage all of my listeners to push the subscribe button because we're going to have some outstanding programs here in the near future. And give me some ideas about what you would like to hear on the podcast. This is a podcast actually for everyone. It leans itself, of course, to the LGBTQ community, but we have many that we'll be interviewing that are allies of the community as well. And so you can also email me at danbolen, DANBOLEN, at cox.net and be able to give some ideas of what you'd like to hear, or if you'd like to consider being a guest on my program as well. We would love to have your input on that too. One other thing I want to mention too to my listeners, if there's a particular story that you're listening to on the podcast station that I have, please comment on it and let us know which ones you really like and which ones that you felt made some difference in your life or difference in your thinking. We'd appreciate that as well, because many of our guests on our podcast have used a lot of courage to be able to come forward and share their stories, and I think you're going to find them very helpful and very strong. So everybody likes to have someone give them a compliment or a thought that they've made a difference in someone's life. So we'd like to encourage you all to do that. Another thing too, pass on this podcast to any of your friends or neighbors that you'd like to have listened to it. Podpopuli, which is the studio I use, goes over 30 media networks worldwide. And I also paid to have my podcast put on YouTube as well. So encourage the friends and family or individuals that you are close to or friends to listen to the podcast themselves as well. It's free. All of the monies that are used for me to record this is paid 100% by me, and this is the gift that I give our community as well. So we're heading into our program this morning, and we have a great guest today. Actually, I met David, or in the sense of he read my memoir, my book, and called me and made comments on that, The Courage to Be Courageous. This is David Gurzenski Luke. And David, welcome to my podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you. And
thank you.
And tell us a little bit about your history and where you were born, and a little bit about your family and what it was like in the generation that you were living in.
So how many hours do we have?
Well, we'll keep it to under an hour.
Okay. All right. Well, I was born in a small little town in Arizona called Douglas, right close to the border. And there were very few gay people there. I just remember there was a hairdresser who was very flamboyant, but the women in the town loved them because they made them look beautiful. And then the other fellow, he was, oh man, what did I call him? He was very popular with everybody, but word got out that he was gay. And it's like the rest of the town just shunned him after that. It's very, very sad.
Very sad as well. Now, also in this town, this is where your father died, had a heart attack, I believe, when you were 11 years old.
11 years old, yes.
And he died at a very young age, at 60 years old.
Yes. So that was a very traumatic incident for me. But as I may have mentioned, before he died, he told me, be the best that you can be. And I've been doing that all my life.
Mm-hmm. Excellent comment that he can give that to you as well.
Yes.
But it would
And
be traumatic for 11-year-old to lose his father, especially if he was close to his father.
yes.
So tell us a little bit about your education and where you went from school and what your degrees were in. I find this very interesting. Tell us about that,
Okay.
David.
Well, I started in a community college right next to Douglas, Cochise College, and I really felt I was coming out of my shell about then. I had been very much of an introvert and quite shy in my early years, but I got very involved in activities on the campus. Eventually, I became editor of the newspaper there, and did a great job because I got awards on my newsletter. Then,
Was that at Arizona State University?
Yeah, well, no, I went to after I left Cochise College, I did go to Arizona State University. That was my next school.
Oh, okay.
And spent 4 years there and graduated in 1965 from that school. I also was very active during those years. I was on the tennis team. I was in some of the dramas that they were put on campus. In fact, there was one year I was selected outstanding male actor
Wow.
in the 4 plays that were put on by the various freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. So I really blossomed in high school as well. Then came the notion that I very much wanted to go on to a university, but with just my mother's funds, and she basically was a housekeeper for other people, it looked like I wasn't going to be able to go to college. But I told myself I was going to raise the money that was necessary to go to college. And I took on a lot of odd jobs. I was actually at a paper route. I did lawns for people. I worked at the local radio station as like a radio announcer.
Oh, wow. Well, we have that in common.
So I was, I have to tell you this was kind of funny. I was on the air and I was reading this commercial and I came across the word turquoise and somehow I couldn't say it. I was stumbling over the word. And finally I just said blue. And so after I finished that.
Well, it is a shade of blue, I guess.
Yes. I said, the manager came in and said, well, maybe we shouldn't have you read advertisements anymore. Just stick to chattering between records. So that's what I did after that.
And then you got your BS degree in journalism from ASU.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then you went on to get your master's degree at the University of Arizona in Tucson. Tell us a little bit about that, how that happened.
Well, I was, first of all, when I graduated, there was a water and power utility in Tempe that I went to work for as almost like a editor for their magazine, and was doing that for a couple of years. But then there was a professor that I had when I was in college, actually he was at ASU, and he kind of took me under his wing and kind of showed me what would be the things that I should do to advance myself in a career in journalism. Because from the positions I held, it was pretty obvious that was going to be my life's work, being a journalist.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in his magazine class, and this was at ASU, and he had an assignment that we were all supposed to write something about ourselves that would be of interest to readers. And I did a story on the first year of a marriage. This is after I'd married my wife. And it talked about things that will come up, do we buy life insurance? Where are we going to live? And all these things, primarily about finances, that suddenly I was thrown into that whole situation. But somehow I managed, and I think that I was still a little lost, but this fellow, his name was Hugh Harrelson, that I attended his magazine writing class. He also happened to be on the Alumni Association, a board of leaders. And so he pulled me aside one day and said, David, there's a position that has been opened up in the Alumni Association for an editor of the Alumni magazine. And he said, I think you should apply. So I did. And on his recommendation, I was selected for the position. So there was kind of a strange switch coming from ASU and switching to the University of Arizona. So it became quite difficult when the two schools met on the football field.
They are definitely fierce competitors.
Yeah, who should I support? But I gained a lot of friends that way. I think that I was. I don't want to backtrack, but I kind of have to at this point, because this was way back in high school that I met my wife. Her name was Pam. And I was actually teaching tennis during summer school. And she was one of my students. And we just started liking each other to the point that I finally asked her to a dance. And it was quite strange, because all this was new to me. I had been so shy around girls, and here this beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed girl showed an interest in me. So we attended several events, and she was, again, an outstanding young woman who was very active on campus. And she also helped bring me out of my shell. She gave me a lot of confidence in myself, which was great. We had two daughters.
So you got married. You and Pam got married when you were at ASU,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
That was before you got your master's in journalism in 1972 from the University of Arizona. So
Correct.
You got married at Arizona State. Okay, got that straight. And then you had two beautiful daughters. Go ahead, Davis. Tell about your daughters.
Jennifer and Julie. I had this thing for J names. I had already picked out John and what was the other one? Jeffrey for the men. Mm-hmm. That was planning ahead. But the two daughters, they were just tremendous. And I think that they were almost the main reason I stayed in the marriage for as long as I did, because it was after the birth of Julie, my younger daughter, that things got a little tight financially for us. And I took on a job, and it was at the, hold on, let me think. SU. Oh, a radio station there. I worked at a radio station, and was able to earn some money. But all this kind of put a strain on the relationship. And I kind of felt so overwhelmed that I was doing the best I can. I was trying to be an outstanding student, working on my master's degree. And when I was at the University of Arizona, when I was attending this class, I think it might have been in publications management or something, that a very outspoken young man stood up and was just so casual in answering questions of the professor.
Empowering,
And
I think you said before. He was empowering.
one day after class, Tom asked me to get a drink with him. And I was quite shocked. And he said, well, I saw that you were watching me every time I stood up in class. And I said, I just really admire your personality, the ease in which you act. And he said, great. Well, I would like to get to know you better. So we went out for a drink.
Now, David, let me ask you a question, because obviously he was attracted to you. Had you had interest in men before this time, or was this the first time? Were you ever having any inclinations toward liking guys before Tom?
Boy, I definitely would admire a very handsome man on the street or wherever. So I think that was my first inclination, that I had some tendencies to be gay.
At the time, though, that you were going through that, did you recognize it at the time, or did you just think I'm different? Was there any shame around that?
Well, it's because of the way I grew up in a small town, and the fact that I had really no connection to gay people at all until this one individual showed an interest in me. So it was all new to me. I was, even with Tom, I was still shy and just surprised that he had an interest in me.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he invited me to go to his apartment, which I did. He made advancements, and it was like, I was very shocked by that. But basically, we got into his bed and do what do men do together.
Yeah.
Bed.
Were you overwhelmed with shame and guilt when that happened?
Oh, very much so. Just, I could not face myself. And I remember when I went home, I mean, I just cried my eyes out, and Pam was wondering what was wrong. And I just couldn't tell her because I was so ashamed of my actions.
Because you were married to Pam at that time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I was married to Pam. So
tell us how you came out to Pam, because she was knowing something was happening. So she made a comment to you, and tell us what you said.
Yes. She was in a car. I was driving. And she just said, have you been having a relationship with another woman? And this just floored me. And the only thing I started sobbing, put my head on the steering wheel, and said, "No, it's another man."
Wow.
And she got so upset. She said, "You know, take me home to my parents." So we did so. And she told her parents about what I had said. And there was great consternation in the family, of course. Pam's dad was a surgeon in a local hospital, very established. This was another thing, too, is that Pam's family was very well off. And, of course, mine wasn't. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't really attracted to the family's financial standing. That was just a way of life to me. Mm-hmm. One thing that I thought I had certainly admired admired Pam's dad, because he was such an outstanding individual in the Rotary Club and held a lot of positions in town. So it was very difficult, but Pam's dad, he kind of saw that there was a strong relationship that Pam and I were building. And he said that, have you ever thought of the idea of having a lobotomy? And of course, I didn't even know what this was. So I said, well, let me think about it. And I read in some books what it was. And I was just horrified.
Oh, yeah.
To think that a surgeon would recommend that to me, just so that his daughter and I could carry on together.
So Pam's dad was actually trying to change you to
yes.
be straight by having a lobotomy, correct?
Right. Yes.
And that had to be shameful for you. You had to feel not in a really good position with yourself and with Pam's dad. How did that play out? I think did you eventually go to a psychologist under his recommendation?
Yes, he recommended a psychologist, and well, actually, I had 3 psychologists that I went to.
Okay.
Most of them got into my life history and all that, but there was nothing I could say. Well, I suddenly discovered I was gay, and now I'm married, and I just don't know what to do at this point. So I was just a very confused young man.
So how did you get out of that, David? How did you get through that and be able to get the courage to get through those feelings? Because at this time, were you happy with yourself, or were you confused with yourself, or both?
Both. I wasn't happy with myself because I felt still very ashamed that I was gay. Mm-hmm. And for a time there, I thought, well, maybe I'm a bisexual person. Mm-hmm. Because I still had interest in women mm-hmm. to a point. But I almost knew that time that my future would not be with another woman, that I would probably become a full-fledged gay man.
Mm-hmm. Did you come to that realization yourself? Did you finally then come to peace with who you were?
Well, it actually was one of the psychiatrists that I started saying. He was on the medical staff at the University of Arizona Medical School. And we talked quite a bit. He was married, and he had worked out an arrangement with his wife that he could go out and see other men maybe once a week, but the rest of the 6 days, he would be just a normal father, husband and father. And at first I thought, well, maybe this is something that I could do. But when I suggested it to Pam, she said, no, I would never do that. And so and then he said, well, David, you have to get off the fence. You can't keep one foot in the straight world and the other foot in the gay world. That's so upsetting. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have a breakdown, if he didn't choose one or the other. So that was, and again, there was still that shame about being gay, because I felt that most people would not accept me for being a gay man, and that it would have a strong impact on my career if my supervisors found out that I was gay. So yes, I was in the closet for a number of years.
I think that's heartbreaking to know. That was the generation that you and I lived in, David, and it was a hard time for us to be able to define who we are, because everybody around us was defining who they thought we should be. Yeah. And yet that was inauthentic for us. And so I really understand the pain, but I know you took some courage and were able to get through that. Now, I know this gentleman, Tom, who, was your first intimate contact, you and him actually became partners for 17 years.
Yes, and that's correct.
And so you were able, obviously, to accept the fact is that you would be with an individual and that you had a very good relationship with him. And I know that things changed. We won't go into a lot of detail, but it had to do with his personality changing, and yes, you did not want to be a part of that. And so you moved on from that period of time.
Yes.
So I think that you've really come a long way. And of course, now today, before we go in that, you made a comment I just thought about. You had an employer or two employers that let you go because you were gay. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. One of the companies I was working for, and this was in Los Angeles, there was a position to be editor of their publications. So I took the job and felt very good about it, and was recommended to take on more advanced positions in publications management for the company. But there was this one woman, my supervisor, who actually went through my desk one night when she was the only one in the company and found a gay publication that I had in there. I was this type of guy that worked 12 hours a day. So I needed that relaxation to kind of get through those long hours. But I didn't find out about that until sometime later that her boss, her supervisor, turns out that she was a lesbian. So she wasn't too fazed by the fact that I was gay, but it was extremely difficult for me to work under this manager who was homophobic after she found this publication in my desk. And so I had, I remember one day I was sitting in the outer area in the office, and my boss, she was walking down the hallway talking to a few other people and said, well, at least with Magic Johnson, we have somebody that we can actually accept as a person that contracted AIDS. That he managed to get through that, but it was like we were, those of us who were gay, of course, Magic Johnson wasn't, but there was that separation that my boss, she did not even want to be around me. And she gave me very poor recommendations or reviews to the point that the company, I remember what it was. I was working one day trying to lift some boxes off a shelf, and I fell with this box and had quite a bit of damage on one foot. And so I had to go through physical therapy for a pretty long period of time. And this said, well, we have to hire somebody else to take your position. And I was kind of awestruck by that. And I thought, it's something more that's bothering her. I mean, she didn't come out and say, well, you're gay and we can't have a gay person in our company. It was just this, realization in my head that she was very much against gay people. And if I didn't leave the company, she would leave the company herself. And I thought that was pretty.
I understand that was so unfortunate. I know that it also ended up where eventually you went to court and
Yes.
against the company, and actually you did that with two employers, I believe.
Yes.
And you won both cases.
Yes, I did.
And so that shows that you took some courage to get through that. That had a lot of fear here. You lost your job. You worked hard with your education. You were doing a good job, outstanding job, actually. And then you got let go. And so I really admired the courage you showed to stand up for yourself, and obviously won 2 court cases on that as well. So I really applaud the courageousness on your part, David, for doing that. Now, you've been with Alan, who is your husband now, and you guys have been together, I believe, aren't you guys been together 19 years?
Actually, 15 years.
15 years.
Our 15th anniversary this year.
15 years you've been married, but haven't you been together 19 years?
Oh, yes, that's correct. Been together for 19 years.
And so, it's interesting. Alan is a substance abuse counselor and works a lot with people, obviously, and well-liked in the industry. And tell us a little bit about the support group that he started that I think is fascinating.
Yes. He just decided this on his own, that he wanted to help people who were going through substance abuse and alcoholism. And it was just something he started on his own and made people aware in the community because I wrote a little article about him, and they carried it in the local newspaper. And there was quite a few people who decided that they wanted to be part of the group. At one time, I think we had about a dozen people that were in the group. I remember one couple came to the group and they were having marital difficulties. And Alan, just by the questions he asked, he was able to resolve that conflict between these two people. So,
boy, he did a lot of good work, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And it's
and
called
very well
Life
respected.
Challenges Support Group. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Life Challenges Support Group.
Right. Excellent. He does a lot of work for that.
Yes.
And that shows
Yes.
the depth of him giving to the community there, too, because this particular service he's doing is free of charge for the group.
That's right.
And
Free of
that's an incredible thing to do. I hope to have the opportunity in the near future to interview Alan, and I think he would have a fascinating story for us as well.
He would.
One of the things I do, first of all, I think you have a good relationship with your kids now, Jennifer
Yes.
and Julie, and I think also a good relationship with your ex-wife, Pam.
Well, it wasn't that way at first.
Right, I get that.
After the divorce, she was very hostile. She almost didn't want me to visit my daughters. I had to go to court on that one. And she was told that no, you can't keep a father away from his children just because you're divorced. So again, we went through that traumatic period. Finally, Pam realized that she didn't want us to be separated that much. So once a week on Saturdays, I was able to come see the daughters. And we became very close. It was just, oh man. Again, they were probably one of the reasons I broke up and left Tom was the daughters. I'll never forget. It was the day that I left Pam. I got in the car and I was driving down the street and I looked in the rear view mirror and one of my daughters was on her tricycle and going down the street and she waved at me and I
That was a very emotional moment, wasn't it, David?
was.
That shows how much your daughters loved you.
Oh, yes.
Now, you have a good relationship with your daughters today. One of your daughters is an attorney.
Yes.
And isn't the other one in a computer analyst?
Yes, for a large corporation. So they're both doing extremely well in their careers, and I'm very proud of them.
And you and Pam have come to peace with each other now, haven't you?
Yes, we have.
And that's a gift that you've both given each other, too, of acceptance. And
it was most evident when the two daughters, they actually spent Thanksgiving with their mom. And it was a city in Utah. But then after she had a big Thanksgiving dinner with them, she loaned them one of her cars and said, go visit your dad. But she made a complete Thanksgiving dinner for us that my daughters drove down to Big Bear.
Oh, that is fantastic.
So I definitely sent her flowers and thanked her very much.
Well, that's great. So, wow, it's interesting how I always said before when we're going through turmoil, there's a gift. We don't see the gift at the time, but if we wait long enough, there will be a gift. And I think you and Pam both give each other a gift from that as well. David, one of the things I always ask my podcast guests, what are their lessons? Because there are going to be people listening to this from all walks of life, going through different trials, different tribulations, fears of this, fear of that. What type of lesson would you like to leave those listeners? You're in a good place with yourself now. You've accepted yourself as a gay man. It was a long journey, but it was a rewarding journey for you. What would you like to leave with our listeners today if they're going through turmoil or having problems with their wives or their parents, any lessons that your life story you'd like to share that they may get that you may be able to, your story may be able to impact them? What are your thoughts on that?
I wish that I had come out earlier. I think one of my daughters or something, I almost feel I was fortunate to be married that period and become a father. But I think after that, I wish that I had the strength to come out completely. So I think I would recommend, if at all possible, a man has to come to terms with himself. And if he feels that he's attracted to men, he should become more open about it and feel like, okay, this is a way of life and I can accept myself and be who I want to be.
That's a great comment. And I think that ties in with being open and honest with yourself. And once you're open and honest with who you are, you'll be open and honest with someone else. And
Yes.
I think you and I talked about this, David, and that's the importance also of having a community. Get connected to a community that does not judge you, that community that accepts you for who you are. And I think that's a powerful comment as well, too. Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast, David. You've been such a pleasure being able to get to know you. Thank you for reading my book. Thank you for your compliments on my book. You were very encouraging to me with your comments about my book, and we appreciate that. So, David, you and Alan, take care. I know Alan's going through a tough time, your husband, dealing
Yes.
with cancer right now, bone cancer. So I just want you to know that our thoughts and prayers are with you, and we want to continue to wish you both the very best. And thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Okay, you're welcome.
You have a good day now. Bye-bye.